you and I help large companies hire executives. If the hiring committee or the board was like, you know what I'd like to do is bring in the two candidates and have them debate a topic. That's not what we'd be like. That is an absurd way to figure out who's the best leader of this company. Welcome back to Shrink Space. I am David Colarosi.
I'm Rob Patterson.
How are you, Rob?
Doing okay. How about yourself?
I'm coming in hot to this podcast. Did you watch the debate?
Of course I watched the debate. It was something that I dreaded coming up to it, but I knew, I thought to myself for a while, I'm not going to watch this thing. It's going to be a dumpster fire. And then come, 7:59, no, I turned it on. I watched it for the first hour.
So look, on mine, I was waiting for it to happen. This is the first time that we're going to see Kamala talk unscripted. And I thought Trump is going to annihilate her. I think he did annihilate her, but I think she fared better, but it was very clear
how the fix was in. How on earth could you watch that and think that he annihilated her? It was almost as if he forgot that he was supposed to prepare for a debate.
He doesn't need to prepare.
I would beg to differ. I would say the best line that I read from this debate was that Kamala was wrong, that Trump was right and Kamala was wrong, that she is for post-term abortions because she just killed a 78-year-old baby on the stage. That was okay, and I think that was the headline
from the Atlantic, the Washington Post, where if anybody that Trump posted right afterwards, he just posted article after article that showed that most people that watched the debate thought that Trump won. You're part of the mainstream media machine where all we do is we get content saying like the narrative is being shifted real time by ABC.
Which, by the way, did he find these news sources? Like from which of his friends sitting on the toilet tweeting did he gather these news sources from?
This is the thing is some people just listen to ABC, NBC, CNN, right? So and anything that deviates from these exceptionally it's not like, oh gee, I wonder if CNN is biased. We know these are these biased sources. But then, there's people that continue to listen to them. Why not allow independent journalists who are actually incented to give the real news? Why not listen to them?
So who are those independent journalists? Like you just named all the mainstream journalism outlets.
Yeah, that's what you listen to. I'm talking. Trump listed. He had 15 sources that showed that he won the debate.
Yes.
You didn't think he won the debate?
No, I'm sure Eric Jr. thought he won the debate as well. That's not a source.
Wait, what? On immigration, he won. On foreign policy, he won. On experience in the office, he won. What? She just her on the economy. He won on. You know what her economic policy was? In what is it? An optimistic economy. What the hell is that? What is that? An economy? An opportunity? What was it? It was some.
I don't know if we're watching the same debate, Dave. Is this the same debate where? I can't imagine the days that someone sat in front of Trump and said, "She is going to bait you on the crowd size of your rallies. Don't take it. Don't take it."
You know what?
He said, "Sure," and then it happened. And then his ego just couldn't handle it. And instead of actually getting where he could have gotten her around some of the immigration opportunities that the Democratic Party has, he didn't even respond to it and instead went straight to his rally crowds.
He's connected to his people. Don't attack the base. And he's getting criticized for talking about immigrants eating cats and dogs. They are. It's like, why are we believing the city planners, the city managers that are incented to lie? There are immigrants cooking cats and dogs. All right. All right.
I can't do this anymore.
Okay, so this is a good transition.
The thought of that, like a barbecue, like, hey, what's up, neighbor? What are you cooking? Some ribs, some chicken? Well, you could say they're ribs.
Just having animals on a spit. Okay. This is a good transition to talk about the discussion topic for today that I am bringing, which is naive realism. So okay. I'm not going to tell you exactly what naive realism is. I'm going to demonstrate it for you, Rob, by looking at how you're problem solving here. Okay.
All right. Let's hear it.
The first thing we're going to talk about is media, your consumption of media.
Right.
So when you're evaluating this debate, what are the sources that you look at?
Yeah. So which makes a ton of sense. If the sources I look at, I would say historically have been mainstream news sources, right? So I will look at sources like I have the New York Times app, mostly because I like to Wordle, and get the New York Times app, you get to actually read it.
And that was a humble brag from Rob Wordles. Okay,
and then I just go to I found I don't know 15 years ago just this site called Political Wire. It just gives me political news all day, and I just look at that. It just gives me headlines to read and look at.
And do you believe that? I've never heard of Political Wire, but do you believe that it's better? It's objective news.
I mean, it comes from news sources like Politico and New York Times and Washington Post, and so it comes from well-known journalists. It's not coming from just people who are tweeting something.
So you believe, but it does seem like you believe the mainstream media, and I maybe don't.
Yeah, I would be one of those people who does. Why don't you?
I think that they have proven themselves to be inaccurate. I don't understand how you could. Did you see the Stephen Colbert show when he's talking to one of the anchors on CNN and goes, we know CNN is really objective, and then the audience just starts laughing hysterically, and she's like, "Wait a second,
let's do this."
Have you not seen this?" And she's like, "Was that a laugh track?" And he's like, "That was not a laugh track, but your network is a laugh track." Okay, so the reason why I'm making or the reason why I'm pushing the news issue is because I think this is a really good example. Not that I think, there's research showing that this is a really good kind of marker of this concept of naive realism, which is essentially saying that you believe your own worldview above that of everybody else's. And you not only do you just believe your worldview, but you sort of distort reality or misinterpret reality such that your way is right and everybody else's way is dead wrong. So, for example, when we talk about news, if I play a caricature of a super conservative person, I am going to say all of the mainstream media, all of the super left-wing media sources are totally out to lunch and never tell the truth.
Yeah.
Bonkers. And on your end, if you play a caricature of a left-leaning person, you're going to think any Fox News, Newsmax, any independent journalist that's leaning that direction is totally lying. And I think it's an important point because it's not just that we are biased, like that we hear something and we distort it to fit our worldview, but we actively go out and change the way we appraise data, right? So the first place where I think it's really clear when you think about naive realism is how you appraise media. Does that make sense to you? Do you think you do that?
It does. It for sure it does. I would say it sounds like you're going to go to another way that naive realism comes out. But before you go there, as you're saying this, it just makes me think again, it's like all or nothing thinking. It's like, why is it that we, that so many people, oftentimes myself included, will just fall into a side or the other?
Mm-hmm.
Why can't I say, or what you were saying about CNN, it's like, okay, yeah, there are people on CNN who do that. There are people on Fox, on MSNBC, especially those types of news sources that are pretty well known to be partisan. Yeah, there are people who do that. But then there are also people on those same news channels and news outlets that don't do that.
Mm-hmm.
Why can't we parse that out?
I can guess. My theory is that that humans work hard to be efficient.
Yeah.
And it is taxing. It's a calorie burner for me to truly objectively evaluate every piece of data that I interpret. And right. So it's like, what's the easiest way I can get through this? Is I'm just going to sort of assume that it's all bad or assume it's all good. And that way I can streamline my life.
That makes sense to me. I mean, that's why political parties exist.
Yeah. And I think it also serves us in that if we start really parsing out all of the data that we interpret, we could find out that we are wrong. And this is a David Kolarossi thought, and there's no research to support this, so maybe you disagree. But I think we really are scared to think that we've operated one way for a long time, especially when we over-identify with our views. To change our views is really difficult. It's a painful thing because we over-identify so often. Do you think that's what it is?
I mean, that's certainly part of it. I think, you're essentially describing, cognitive dissonance.
Yes.
Right. Which is essentially, you will look for information that aligns with your own worldview and perspective, and then, discount the perspectives and worldviews of others. It's similar, I think, what we're talking about here. But yeah, you can't have those competing mindsets in your head. And so people tend to choose one.
Yes. And when we talk about cognitive dissonance, I think it's important to say that the dissonance is uncomfortable.
Yeah.
If I behave one way or believe one way and then behave or believe in a different way, it's the friction there is very difficult for us. Mm-hmm. And so it's easier for us to go, I'm just going to ignore that over there and do it this way, or vice versa.
Yes, because I can continue on with my life then without that discomfort.
Yeah.
So yeah, that makes a lot of sense to me. It is just easier. I can also just go on with my life and be comfortable and say, well, I don't believe everything, but it's enough.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to move forward with it.
Yep. I think this is really interesting when you look at, there's been research when they're looking at when do we see this naive realism, and oftentimes the first marker is people start questioning other people's sources of data, like media sources.
Right.
I think it's really interesting as far as the debate, the number of people on the right who weren't happy with the way the debate went, whether or not they thought Trump won, they didn't love the way that it went. And the two things I've heard a lot is Kamala cheated, or all, ABC was very biased in the kinds of questions that they were asking.
Right. I'm laughing because you said it's on the right, and I've talked to two people who are left leaning. One of them even wrote an email to ABC saying how poor their moderators did. What a poor performance their moderators on the left. Yes.
Wait, thinking that because they thought it was biased towards Kamala or that towards Trump?
No, that they did not do a good job at putting the fences around Trump so that he wouldn't go off or that he wouldn't interrupt. Because I think at some point, for example, even though the microphones were muted, you could still hear when people were talking, like when the other candidate was talking. Anyway, so I heard this and it just made me think that, yeah, again, people have this mentality in mind. They're going in and they're ready to root for their person. And then anytime something doesn't go exactly the way that they want, there's a reason for it.
Yep.
So yeah, so on the right, I would see how that happened more after the debate, but I have at least two anecdotal examples of left-leaning people who said the same thing.
Yep. And they've done a lot of, there are so many interesting studies where they've looked at bias in appraisal of events, like in particular with referees, where they'll film a game, and then they'll change the color of the jerseys and ask people that are fans of one team or the other, was the ref biased? Yeah. And you always think the ref is biased against your team.
Yep.
Invariably. It's like the easiest thing to see, that you really struggle to objectively evaluate a thing that's appraising or giving information.
Yep.
So that's the first big one with naive realism. The second one is the way we appraise critical thinking of people that disagree with us. So Rob, hear that you think that Kamala did a great job in the debate. And so what I want to know from you is, well, then what do you think her policies are? How are you okay voting for someone who doesn't have a clear policy?
Mm-hmm.
It's just this vague, I'm going to give everybody a ton of money, but that's not an economic policy.
Right.
How do you justify believing into that?
And then going back to what we were just talking about, most people who are voting can't tell you specifics about policies that either of these candidates are going to make.
Mm-hmm.
And so, A, you're not going to get an answer from me if you ask me that question.
Uh-huh.
And then B, what I'm probably just going to do, if I'm that person, is then just go back at you with some other attack on Trump's character, or his litany of things that he's done in the past. And so it's not an actual conversation.
No.
Hey, I don't know the answer, and I don't want people to know that I don't know the answer.
Right. So
or
it's
that
just
I may
smoke
be
screen.
I may be making a decision that's a very surface level decision.
Yes.
And so I just come back at you with something else.
Yes. And the research would say that the in particular, even if you don't know, right, but the appraisal of other people of being stupid is very common.
Oh yeah.
And I think I hear this on both sides. The Trump supporters they're not very educated. And because they're not very educated, they are taken by this guy who is a schoolyard bully. Yep. And on the right, the left is unable to see the big picture. They're too focused on, their emotions,
politics, and
their woke
identity.
politics. And there's this sort of like strong battle about how stupid the other side is.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's interesting you sort of pointed this out, that even if you become more educated, it's not like you go, oh, I see the nuance here, I'm going to be less negatively. And the more you know, the more aggressive you are, because as you're learning, you are only going to be you're going to be biased in how you consume the data, and then turn around and aggressively attack people that oppose you.
I've mentioned my dad on this podcast before, and I have another example here. He loves to do this. People who his family members and friends who have a difficult political orientation that he does, whenever he hears something that he doesn't agree with, he says, well, tell me the facts. Because he has his, right? Yeah. He reads a lot of different things. He tries to come up with facts. He doesn't, know it all, but he's very well read.
Yes.
To his credit. And so he has arguments with people oftentimes. And I don't think he does this as much anymore, but I certainly remember, like, when I was a kid and a little bit later on in life, well, they don't have any facts. Well, politics is not necessarily, I would argue that politics is one of the most emotional acts that anyone who lives in a liberal democracy makes.
Yes.
So you can have all the facts you want, but you're not talking the same language. You're talking across each other.
It reminds me of, I think it's Ben Shapiro that has the saying, facts don't care about your feelings.
Yeah.
Right. And you're never, in the history of political debate, I don't think anybody has ever used facts to influence somebody else to buy into their view. Because you've got your facts, they've got your facts, right? And you're not able to ever objectively evaluate the data, and certainly not objectively listen to somebody else.
No.
So the next sort of marker of this naive realism is if you really think that you're smarter and able to process super nuanced, a super nuanced issue, you're probably really biased in your appraisal.
Are you giving me direct feedback right now?
Yeah. Yeah. That's what this whole thing is about. Is
this just a roundabout way of telling me something about myself, Dave? I don't appreciate that.
And then the last one is, which I think is the best, is that if you think that the other person, the other party, is morally bankrupt, that's a major sign of naive realism, right? and there are moments in the debate where you can see the politicians, I'm not sure if it's intentional or not, but leveraging this to try and sort of bolster their base to hate the other party.
Yeah.
Right. When Trump says, she hates Muslims, and then she turns around and says, you think the Proud Boys are an honorable organization, right? We start doing this thing where it's like, they're both hyperbole. I don't think either party actually thinks that that's accurate, but they are definitely pushing that button to allow their base to go, anybody over there is morally bankrupt, and our party, our side, is the most ethical.
Yeah, and you start getting to people's values. Yeah, that's where I go back to political parties as like companies with customers, right?
Uh-huh.
Is to me that someone told me that, I don't know where I heard it. It's been a while now, but I had never thought about that before. And then I hear that, I'm like, yeah, it's a company that wants customers, just like Sam's Club and Target and wherever else, any other brand wants customers. So do political parties. That's the way that we experience our politics in the US, which is similar to a lot of other democracies.
Yep.
But you say that, and yeah, so it's like, how do we identify our values, then communicate those values out there so that we pull the more people in to our side? Yeah. And one way to do that is, as opposed to just saying, well, here's why we're great. Sometimes a more effective way is, hey, here's how these people suck, and here's how they're terrible, and here's again how they're morally bankrupt.
Yep.
And I would imagine, I don't know if you've, in your looking into all this, if you found, any one of these particularly more impactful than the others, but I would say that would be the most impactful. If I had to guess, if you had to parse these three different components out that you're talking about, I would guess that would be the most impactful.
Yeah. Yeah. I think I don't have data to support that, but I would intuitively, that sounds right. I know for me that when I disagree with somebody, and I get to a place where I feel that way, it's very hard for me to come off it. Yeah. And I also know that I experience fast vitriol when I feel like I've been appraised as being morally bankrupt.
Yeah.
Right. When there's friction where I'm like, oh, you think I'm a bad person? I'll show you a bad person. You know what I mean? I can get myself to that place.
Yes. Same. So, I mean, that's politics for me, but that's, in any situation.
Yeah.
Where I feel like, yes, someone is questioning my character, my values, my intentions. That is not great. And yeah, that's when I get the worst side of me to come out, because then the defensiveness comes out, and then the judgment on the other person, and everything we were talking about with politics, I think it comes out in other ways too. Most definitely.
Yep. Yeah. So I thought the debate was a really good sort of framework to learn about this idea of naive realism. The question then, of course, is, well, what do you do about it?
Right.
Like we all experience it. What do you do about it? And the answer is awareness, which is like the most, like the least helpful solution.
You're a great psychologist, Dave.
Here's yeah.
Well, the first step is awareness.
Yeah. Just be aware. Just think on it. So the advice that I would give, and I'm curious what you think, Rob, because there's not like a pragmatic process you can use, but the key is, how do you recognize that you're being biased in your thinking? And to me, the answer is, if you ever feel yourself being at any level emotional or self-righteous about some topic, if you left that debate and you were like, those MFers on the other side, how could they? You're probably not objectively evaluating the situation.
Yep.
What do you think? Is that a good,
I would completely agree with that. And I think it kind of goes both ways. So if you are the person who feels that way leaving it, or if you're the person who is kind of being that self-righteous person in a conversation like that, I think either way, there's something about that there. I think that makes a lot of sense to me, because I was thinking the same thing. It's, what do you take away from an interaction like that or an experience? And if that's what you're feeling, you're probably struggling with the naive realism there. another thing that I've tried to do, whether it comes to politics or just, different perspectives on whatever, is, and this is, I think, something maybe you and I may find ourselves more opportunities to practice, just given some of the work that we do when we are working with leaders who have different management styles, or leaders who work in, organizational cultures that are kind of different than what we're used to. We have to put ourselves in people's shoes pretty frequently. Mm-hmm. And we have to do our best to reserve judgment and having the answer, because we don't know all their context. Mm-hmm. And so again, this also sounds like an easy way for a psychologist to get out of answering a question directly, but sometimes it's just putting yourself in that person's shoes, a bit of that empathy.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I think not only does that diffuse it for you, but it probably diffuses it for the other person too.
Yeah. There's an author named David McRaney who wrote a book, How to Change Minds. And what he's talking about in there is essentially what we're, it's not about convincing somebody with the data. It's about aligning on values and having compassion for each other. Like mm-hmm. That's the starting point, because the truth is, like, even if you think about like something is so politically charged as the debate, the audience, after that debate, one party will say, "You guys are whatever. You're racist." Both parties would say, "I'm not racist. What you're doing is racist." But the value is we all don't want to be racist.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? So oftentimes we're really aggressive and we're throwing out ad hominems at each other. But the through line is we both actually agree about who we want to be as people.
Right.
Do you know what I'm saying? Which is an interesting dynamic that occurs when we get wrapped up in this naive realism.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense to me, and kind of goes back to what you were saying before, when, if you feel like someone's assaulting your character, then they're not going to get the best out of it. Yeah, I think whenever you start hurling, terms like that against other people, you're not going to get a very nuanced response.
Yeah.
Or an unemotional response.
Yeah.
So before we end, we started with the debate. I want to end with the debate, because I've heard this a lot, and I'm interested in what you have to say, or what you think about this. So in the age of social media, in the age where news comes at us from all angles, do you think we need debates anymore? Presidential debates?
I do strongly.
You do strongly?
Do you not? Hold on. Do you not?
I will respond after you respond.
You'll abstain. Okay. All right. Because I was going to say, you are, wherever you're getting your sources, are stupid. You're stupid and a real a-hole if you don't think.
Do you want to start this again?
I think that we need them, because I don't know how else we get to know our candidates. I think what people saw here or heard here, hopefully you recognized, was some theater. But I do genuinely believe that we should know our politicians, and I do feel like the machine gets so big that we don't actually get to know who our politicians are. And so for me, it's like the debate's the only way that you really get to see who is that person that's leading the country. So I like it.
I agree, because I think your point makes sense to me. I would say it in a similar way: is sometimes it's difficult to know the candidate if not in relation to the other one.
Yeah.
And in relation to the other, you're able to make, hopefully, a better distinction, so that whatever pulls those levers for you to kind of, you're going to vote for a certain candidate who has certain belief systems or whatever style of approach, you're going to best get that in a debate.
Mm-hmm. The
only thing about this most recent one that caused me to second guess my thought there is, and again, this is probably just my own personal need, I learned nothing about what these two candidates actually stand for.
Mm-hmm.
And so I understood, I get a lot about their personality, their reaction to certain things, right? I could see how they were coached and how they did or probably did not, rely upon that advice. But I don't know any more about Kamala Harris's approach to, immigration than I do about Trump's, better ideas for healthcare. And so maybe I shouldn't expect debates to kind of, distill that out for me. Maybe they never have, and I just have never paid attention to it before. Maybe this was an example, one that just went, that was just all name calling. But that was the only thing that made me think like, all right, well, maybe debates aren't great for that anymore.
Yeah. I think they're not. So I still think we should have debates, but I also I guess I have to acknowledge that like you and I help large companies hire executives. If the hiring committee or the board was like, what I'd like to do is bring in the two candidates and have them debate a topic. That's not what we'd be like. That is an absurd way to figure out who's the best leader of this company. Right. And it's the same. It is an absurd way to see. Right. I mean, it's almost like the actual answer would be to run people through some simulations and see how they would actually respond to a challenge. That would be a more accurate way to do it.
And we are in a very unique situation, at least with these two, is, we have a former president and a current vice president. So, not that it's the exact same, but they've been through some sort of simulated environment or the actual role already. And so, it does causes me then to think, well, they've both been through that already. So then the debate is again just more about their personalities and is less about their, any sort of position that they have on something. But that maybe this is going to be a new podcast episode for us at some point in the future is right. It is just the cult of personality that becomes more important now, I think, than how people stand on issues.
Yep.
So
good. That was an interesting conversation.
Yeah.
Before we go, we have some administrative work for our audience. First thing is like and subscribe. And if you don't, Rob and I were going to be very sure that you are stupid, morally bankrupt, and have somehow digested some media that's misdirecting you.
Yes, that's right.
Look into it. You should be liking and subscribing.
Yes.
And check us out on social media at ShrinkSpaceShow. That's at TikTok, Instagram, and YouTube Shorts.
Yes. I would also ask that you all leave comments. If you like what you heard, please tag me. If you did not, please tag Dave. We are interested in all of your comments about the topics that we talk about. If you have suggestions for things that you'd like to hear two psychologists talk about, please email us at shrinkspaceshow@gmail.com. And until next time, talk to you later.